Good.
Yeah. Got it.
Hello, Nick.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. It's fun. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, me too. And I'm curious to see what will come out.
Who knows? It's a little, it's a random meeting generator. It's just going to flow out the way it's going to flow.
Yes. Nice one. And let's start with an easy one, just to get comfortable. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator? And actually, do you?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think of myself actually more of as an inventor, but inventing is facilitation, right? So I invent for a living, and it took me a long time to actually say that. Like, maybe I knew I was doing or I didn't know I was doing, but actually normally as an inventor or prior to this, I would say I'm making this or I'm making that. So I wasn't abstracting to say, I make things. This is one of the things I'm making, right? But I did it because after inventing a few things, this incredible like one-trick pony problem. If you're an inventor, like, is that all you got? What next? What do you got? Like, there's this pressure. And so I abstracted myself from doing one project to say, this is what this project defines me, to I'm defined by the fact I invent things. And inventing is facilitation, right? It's like I walk through life, see a problem, and then start to solve it.
So basically, so finding a solution for a problem is the facilitative process to making it easy?
I think so. And I'm used to a lot of blank looks. Like, the number of people that have said to me, you know, that project you were working on, when you first told me about it 3 years ago, I really didn't understand it. But now, wow, it's really cool. And I was like, yeah, it's a good job I didn't say this. I don't know, I never say this as a reply, but it's a good job I didn't listen to your first feedback and stop, right? It was true. Like that blank look when you first describe something to someone and they're like, I don't see the need for that. I don't understand what you're talking about. Oh, in that case, I'll just stop then, shall I? But, if you have to have incredible self-belief and you have to be really bulletproof to all this feedback so that, you keep going, that you don't get sideswiped by the things that come your way. Yeah.
And I wonder, so for me, facilitation is the belief that the group knows it already. So the solution is somewhere intrinsically to the group. Whereas invention is, would it then be intrinsically in you and it just waits to come out? Is it self-facilitation?
I have inverted that process because I used to believe it was in me. And maybe that was youthful me that had infinite bounding energy just to charge at everything and do everything. And I remember I created this software product. I sold it to business objects, and I ended up inside working for this guy called Dave Kellogg, who's their CMO at the time, super cool guy, and very, very smart. And he used to curate things. He never had, not an insult, he never had an original thought. He gathered all these thoughts from everyone else, and then his originality was in spinning the story of assembling all these pieces together. And I felt cheated in that moment for a little while. Like, he didn't invent this, but the end result of what he put together was better than, I was like, oh, maybe I should try curation and relying on other people's genius instead of having to do all the heavy lifting, right? So if you think you're the inventor, it's hard work. Whereas if you just listen to what the universe is telling you and the way people turn up and their energy and their ideas, then actually it's not your idea. You're just grabbing other people's ideas, and then they're more like, oh, this looks like my idea, and then people accept it, right? So people's willingness to pick up their own ideas is much more profound, and they don't have to actually translate. It's like, oh yeah, what a great idea, right? And I've found, and specifically more recently, mindful me is more like I sit with it. Like a 20-year-old me I couldn't have handled this imperfection, this thing not knowing the answer. I would have ground it out and sweated it out and go, that's it, tie a bow on it and it's done. But it would have worked, but it wouldn't be the best answer. Usually the best answer comes from waiting, just let the idea percolate and let people critique it, and skillful listening. You don't need that many people to find out if something's good or bad, or if what you need to do next, right? People think that you need like this massive audience. I don't think you do. I always try and cycle. I have this cycle of people that I go around when I'm testing an idea, and I try not to go back to the same people too soon. So then I'll loop back to them 6 months later or 3 months later when there's something significant's changed. So then they see it and they go, oh, wow, great progress, right? But if I show them at each iteration, they get bored, right? So I keep finding new people, and then I keep going back to people that I saw it, 3 to 6 months earlier. And then I get a lot out of that because I can see like I live through the energy that people bring to the idea. I almost think of myself as the shepherd, like specifically with Deckible. I've really I feel it was sort of originally thought it was my idea, but it's not. I think it's just coming through me, and I'm just holding it, giving it space, and then letting other people come and shape it and drive it. And it's got its own energy and its life and its vibrancy. So yeah, there were some things I just think I really would have earlier on. I couldn't have sat with that incompleteness, but that incompleteness was where a lot of them, like we've had so many happy accidents because it was under engineered rather than over it, and not in an engineering sense, but we didn't overthink it. And because I didn't overthink it, the right ideas just kind of came into play.
It leaves space for emergence.
Yeah.
And it leaves space for all these other voices to contribute. And what you just described made me think of successful versus unsuccessful change processes, where there's research that says the most successful change processes have in common that they emphasize on what remains the same.
Which is very counterintuitive to someone that wants to invent. Yes. It's like, I want another big idea, look, and people are like, same. It's comfortable, right?
Exactly. And we don't like the big novelty. It's intimidating if everything is different. So what you just described is the curation, bringing all the existing ideas together, but together combined in a new way is still something new, although it feels as comfortable as the old.
And what I think I've learned is, if you innovate, if you have your core innovation, it's counterintuitive. You don't need any more. Like, I mean, that's how you end up getting displaced 10 years later if you didn't continue to innovate. But you don't need to over innovate, right? So for example, with Deckible, our core innovation is to digitize card decks, right? But I always fall back onto this metaphor that we're trying to be audible for decks, right? And so I keep saying to myself, we have all this, that's where our innovation is. We don't have to innovate, we can just copy Audible. So, and I tell people this, and it makes people smile and it gives them a lot of comfort. And I say, if I don't know the answer, I just ask myself, what would Audible do, right? What does Audible already do? And we'll just copy that. We don't need to innovate. We know, innovation should be constrained to your core competency, your core point of being, your raison d'etre, right? What's the core thing you're trying to do? Innovate there. You don't need to innovate in every single way possible, because to your point, if you embrace that, the thing you're creating becomes more like other things, and therefore it's more palatable to more people. It's not this whole swap out that's like hard to swallow. It's challenging, whereas it's more similar, it's easier to palate.
Yes, and I think we have to trick our brain Because our brain, when we are looking for solutions, we, as being risk-averse animals, we don't want to die.
Right.
We're looking for the past strategies that have helped us survive. But to truly innovate, we cannot rely on our past strategies. So if we are asking, how can we innovate or how can we find a new solution, we are asking the wrong question for the way how our brain works. Right. So by asking a different question, or as you define it, okay, how would Audible do it? Right. How would Superman do it?
Right.
We're tricking our brain, and only then we can find new solutions.
We all need to find our Superman, right? Who is the person you're trying to be like? And then how are you trying to be different from that person? Because mostly you can be just like Superman, except for, oh, we just died kryptonite, right? Then we have a solution, right? We just have that one point. You only need to have 1 point of difference generally to succeed, right?
Yeah.
Then it's like, oh, I can see you're like X, but you've got this, right? Because we think in metaphors, right? So if you actually say, we're like Audible, but we do this cool thing. Oh, wow. When was the last time you ever went to a movie and you said to them, well, it was like, and it was situated here, and there was this guy that you don't try and describe the plot to anyone. You say it was like Jaws, but it was in the jungle. Oh, cool, I get it, right? Like it was always like this movie, but with that slant. Okay, and ideas are like that. It's how we communicate. We never, if you try and tell someone the whole story, they're like, okay, you lost me 5 minutes ago. I have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, it's sad that words don't mean anything anymore, but they don't.
And I think, so yes, it's something that we can connect to. So to save time and to have the context, and something we can emotionally relate to. Right. Because when I hear Audible, I know the experience that I have with it.
Right. So you want to pick when you pick your Superman, Audible, make it sure that it's an experience that people have positive associations with. If you said it's like the dentist, but people will be like,
the dentist, but it's fun.
You go to a party and tell people you're a dentist, and people are like, oh, okay, next, and they want to move away because they don't want to talk unless they've got toothache in that moment, right? But if you pick a positive experience to be like, and then people can hang with that, right? If they liked your movie if they liked the movie you said it was like, you've got them 75% of the way, right?
Yes.
It was like Harry Met Sally, but right. Oh yeah, I love that movie, right? Oh, I see, that sounds cool. And so be careful which metaphors you pick, because that's metaphors are like the grease that oils the wheels that moves the thing along, right? Your ideas are transmitted more freely if you pick the right metaphor.
And can derail with too much oil.
Yeah, exactly. You think, and you get too many metaphors, and then it's like, well, I don't understand what's going on, right? And the people who win get the right metaphor generally.
And I wonder whether this is actually the ability to synthesize, to find the easy metaphor in the complexity, whether this isn't a facilitator superpower, to have all this abundance of ideas and then a few clusters and then boil it down to something that is actually meaningful and can be carried forward. And that the group feels related to or feels ownership for.
Right, because when the group leaves that session that day, they say, well, how was your day today? Oh, great. We talked about insert metaphor, right? Yeah. Oh, cool. But it's like that, but like this. Oh, cool. Oh, great. What a good session. Maybe you should hire that facilitator again, right? It's like, they won't say that because they're going to take their own glory from it. But the facilitator was the oil that made that whole thing happen, right? It felt effortless. That's the skill, is to make things feel effortless. So people come with you on the journey instead of suffering at the the face of a blunt instrument. You get bludgeoned to death with too many ideas, too much information, too many decisions.
So which of your identities came first, the facilitator who helped the innovator, or the innovator who helped the facilitator?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know. I've always, it's funny when you talk, you're kind of asking comparative brain chemistry, like how does one person think versus another? Because when you say something, I don't think, oh, you're thinking completely differently, right? So we just think, and we think everyone else thinks like us. And until you realize you don't, and then it's like, oh dear. So I realize because I've thought about this a lot, that I have this amazingly over-connected brain. Like I can walk through any situation and I see things being connected, and I'm like, I actually have to throw stuff away because everything is connected in my world. It's like, and I interface with other people that don't see any connections. And I see connections that lead me to a solution, but then I choke from indigestion from all these things coming at me. And I'm like, and I have to like tear away all these things to not get distracted by them, or to choose the three things that are the idea. And that's kind of juggling between facilitating and ideation, which is have some more confusion, because the ideator thinks the ideas are cool. And what they don't realize is people choke from indigestion of too many ideas, and the facilitators like cherry picking. And I always work this, I love the idea of a straw man. So like if you have an idea, don't just have an idea, have a straw man. This is how it's going to work, right? This is our idea. Oh, I don't like that. So you rip the head off and you put a new head on, and those arms aren't right. So you put better ones on, and you keep iterating, but you've always got a working model of what you're trying to create. And then you can always get better, because you can always show your work. You can show your straw man to people, and that's essentially your metaphor. My idea is emerging like this. This is how it looks, and then you can see that blank look, or that look of excitement.
So the straw man, something like a prototype.
Yeah, a straw man is a prototype, exactly, right?
And so I can relate to the challenge of having too many ideas and to literally connecting everything. And I wonder to what extent this can be a superpower or actually an obstacle in facilitation. Because I can imagine that, or I observe myself in these kind of situations, that I then become increasingly impatient, or I'm fighting between my neutrality hat. Oh, it's all in the power and the emergence of the group, versus how can you not see that?
Right. No, and this took a lot of mindful reflection on my behalf to recognize that I actually see everything as connected. And I don't find that confusing, but I recognize that other people, don't see like 1/10 of everything that I see, because it's just, and it's not a super skill, it's actually a curse. So like you could be sitting listening to this going, it's both. You could be envious of like, why can't I be like, I'm like, you be careful what you wish for, because if you have this, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's crazy in there. And I've really learned to like tone it down, to be better, to be a better inventor. I've learned to tone it down, I think.
I had to,
less signals,
or planning or designing systems into that prevent myself from implementing all the ideas or rushing to. So sometimes I call them brain farts.
Right.
Other people fart. I just have ideas coming out, and I need to have a system to avoid just jumping on that, because I fall in love and I get so excited.
Twice I have solved that problem with probably more than twice, but with a person. So I'm like the ideation machine. I kind of set the tone of what we're trying to create, but then I take myself out of the process, because if I say everything we're doing, I'm trying to push too much in there. And so what I let someone with a more rational, normalized skill set to filter that down. And if they don't get the vision right, or they miss something out, I bring it back. And if I bring it back noisily enough and often enough, it'll make its way in. Otherwise, they do a wonderful, I've discovered given my skill set, I've found this interface with people who basically ignore a lot of what I say, but they're not ignoring it. They're just deprioritizing it to make something manageable and let it get finished. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I can think honestly, it was when I built, we built this Venn diagram product called Set Analyze that we sold to business objects. And there was a guy called Dave Garvey was just this, he was my interface between me and development. And he just did a wonderful job of ignoring a lot of stuff. So it sounds like, you know, he just ignored a lot of the things I said wonderfully, but he did it just right. You know, he prioritized and listened and stopped us from choking on doing too much. Like one of my favorite quotes from my former co-founder, I was with Lisley, Sharm, and he says this all the time, and it's like it stuck with me. It's like the more startups die of indigestion than anything else. You know, it's like, oh, we can do that, and then you just like, you know, gluttony. Like instead of saying, yeah, we can do that, we put it on a separate plate. We're not going to start it yet until I've had this whole meal, I've been for a walk, I've digested, I've slept, I'm ready for some more. Without that control, human nature is like, oh yeah, right? Because you're performing for the customer who's like, I want this, I want that. Like they don't even know what they want necessarily. They're just expressing things. If you listen to every word they say, you would get distracted and go off in too many different directions. Whereas if you listen to 50 people, you can filter that down and see where the real, you know, where is the real issues, where's the direction you should be heading. So if you can have somebody on your team, I mean, that works for me because got this super connection, right? So then I've recognized that's a joy and a curse, and I could try and handle it myself, but I've found hire a rational person between you and the development team, and they do the filtering, and it's worked quite well.
And it almost sounds like a technique that we would use for group work and facilitation.
Yeah, I think it's also like realizing where because everything's a spectrum, right? So some people are super ideators and just like over connectors, and some people are so logical and rational they won't do anything until it's like they don't see the purpose of doing any of these things. They'll stay with what is, right? And if we could recognize who sits where on the spectrum, we could then pair people up who works better together. And that's something I fell into, luckily. Like when Dave and I did that, I didn't even know he was doing it. But I looked back afterwards and I was like, that's what he did, right? That's really valuable. I don't think that business would have succeeded in the way it did if I'd got involved in every step of everything, because I would have been wanting everything because I was way younger. So maybe these days I'm a bit more like, going back to my Audible thing, decide who you like, decide whose decisions you don't have to make decisions about, right? It's really easy when someone else has already made that decision. You don't have, like, innovation is something you use sparingly. It's like glitter and sparkle. You just not like swamp the whole recipe with it, right? Because everyone's going to choke and it feels completely alien to people. This is so different than anything else, right? And it's like that. So you remember that Scamper innovation thing where you like, what's that acronym for, like subtract, combine, remove more? I forget the full acronym, but that's kind of the core of innovation, is what you always do. You can add something, take something away, amplify something, reduce something, turn it upside down. If you do all of those in one go, you just end up with a mess.
Yes, and I would be curious to hear the story behind Deckible, because at the end, when the moment that you do have the metaphor, oh, it's like Audible, but for card decks,
right?
Then it's so easy and everyone understands. And I assume that you didn't wake up or had this under the shower moment. Oh, you know what? Let's do an Audible for card decks.
If only. Oh my God, that would be like, that's like idea porn, right? It's like, wake up with this, oh, it doesn't happen that way. Like anyone who thinks ideas happen like that, it's not true. I went on a 3-year journey before I even found the starting point for Deckible. And for 3 years, I've been building this. The metaphor of choice during that 3-year period was an exercise machine for the soul, for the mind, right? And it was like this idea of instead of going to the gym, you would go to an exercise machine to work out all those things, right? And it was pretty good, but the problem is it grew and grew and grew. And I kept trying to finish it and think, how do I get to the finishing line? And where can I draw a line around this and say that's a complete product? And there was some amazing things in this product, but there was too many ideas and they were like scattered.
What was the initial problem you tried to solve? So what is it about card decks that fascinated you? Or maybe it wasn't even about card decks.
The original problem we were trying to solve was I was working with a good friend who's a coach, and she basically had all this content she wanted to package up and create recurring revenue. And we looked at the existing online learning platforms and just were like, these are not fun. She's an experiential coach. She creates meaningful learning experiences, and the existing online learning platforms, which I don't need to name here, don't, right? They're not experiences. They're classic teacher on stage talking down to the student.
Bullet list style.
Yeah, right. It was boring, right? So we try to create this much more engaging, where the students are participating, and it became more of an interactive survey because the survey tools are not that fun either. So it was like moving things around, making choices. And in the middle of that journey, because I've invented a board game, right? So I play a lot of board games still. So I love cardboard. I own a lot of games. And I came across all these card decks. And they're like coaching decks, and there's like oblique strategies, Brian Eno's deck. And it's just like, oh my God, we could talk for hours on card decks that exist. And I started collecting these and realizing they were really cool choice mechanisms. Like, because I can lay out some cards and go, yes, no, maybe. And so I do a card sort. Right? I divide my choices into stacks. I was like, this is really fun. This is like tactile and engaging and human and real. So that was wonderful. It was a blessing and a curse, because I'd added that to what was already there. So my exercise machine now included card decks. And it got bigger and bigger. And after 3 years of building it was phenomenal. Like I showed it to a lot of people, and there was the light went on when they saw it, but it was also, there was too much. And so I thought my problem was user interface design. And so I went and hired this UX team, right? And they were phenomenal. They did that rare thing that, you must have heard that old joke of here's my consultant comes along, here's my watch, tell me the time, right? There's too many consultants, just sell them back exactly what you just told them. Well, they did the brave thing. And they said, what you should do, Nick, is throw this all away. And you should just make card decks the core metaphor, not an exercise machine. They didn't just say that. They said, oh, by the way, it should look like this. And it was beautiful. And so now I'd seen this beautiful thing. I couldn't go back to this ugly duckling, like, poor thing that was like I'd made lovingly over 3 years. And there was too many bright ideas in there. But the cool, and they said, look, Nick, you get most excited about card decks compared to the rest of it. So if you just focus on that, that's what we've done. That's what we've built for you here as a mock-up. So I'm like, how many days is it going to take to build this? So they quoted me a number. It was pretty low. And I was like, I don't think they can make it in those days, but I can't really say no to that offer, right? So I basically got them to build it. And here we are a year later. Yeah, the estimate was out by magnitudes, but that's irrelevant because the quantitative value of the experience that it delivers is out by even more magnitudes. It's just like, oh my God, like people, I literally have phone calls with people. They're like, I can see them like vibrating with excitement about, you know, how Deckible is going to transform their life. And it's like, oh my God, this is such a beautiful, like I showed a lady yesterday, her deck, she loaded it, she created it, she loaded it onto Deckible, and I showed it to her yesterday. She was literally in tears.
Mm.
And I'm like, and she's like, Nick, you're like, I'm like, don't worry. This is the most beautiful gift you could give me. This is my energy. This is my fuel from oasis to oasis. Because when you're inventing, there's often, you know, long periods between fuel and energy and rest, right? To see that was so, and that happens a lot. Like, so it's, you know, you're on a right path. And yeah, I've invented a lot of things in my life, but this has got 100 or 1,000x over anything I've ever touched before. It's just beautiful. Feels great, a great responsibility. And I actually don't feel like I'm more like the shepherd of it now. Not, it's my job and duty to the universe to like bring this to life. It's not really my idea anymore. It's come through me.
So what makes the difference?
The difference of what?
The difference of just another tool, platform, game.
Oh, I think I'm going to quote Seth Godin here. Seth Godin basically said that ideas explode into a vacuum. Well, there are not many vacuums available today because they've been filled. Like, you want to go into a photography app, Flickr did it, and then Instagram came along. I don't think there's any more. Well, it actually went Flickr, Facebook, Instagram, right? There's no more innovation going to come from there, I don't really think. You know, most things have been done by someone, so there isn't a vacuum. It's the need has been filled, right? Whereas for some reason, card decks have grown. More and more people are creating card decks. They see the value of using card decks in coaching and in spirituality and wellness, but there's been no digital solution. So the why of this is because it's not been done well. There's a huge unmet need. And so you show this to people and they're like, oh my God, I want that. I can see my deck in there. Or I can, you know what I'm shocked as well is how many people have actually turned up and said, I'm going to create a deck for this. Mm. My original vision was just, let's go and find all the decks that exist and bring them on. And I even started by reaching out to people whose decks were out of stock. So there was a real pain point. You don't have the money, obviously, or the desire anymore to keep printing this. There is a demand for it. What if we could digitize it? Okay, yeah, I'm in. So we got a bunch of people came on board with that because their decks were out of stock. But along the way, I explained it to some people and they're like, well, I could make a deck for that. And I can point to like dozens of decks that have been created just for Deckible. So that's pretty epic. You realize the energy, the investment, the emotional effort that people have gone through to see this and say, I'm going to now. Yeah. And this is pre-launch. This doesn't happen. Like, people don't go, oh, let me invest in your idea. It hasn't even launched yet. I'm going to go and create something for it. Well, they see that because they realize the energy of the infrastructure. And we have 500 people that have signed up already. There's 200, we will launch with 250 quality decks. These things are approved. They're not just like, you don't just put your deck up, and these are beautiful decks. I mean, I could spend hours just, you know, going through the decks that are so beautiful. And it's exciting to see that. And it's a living thing. It's out of my control. I'm just like facilitating it now.
And what is it that these card decks facilitate? So what can card decks do to individuals and groups?
Yeah, okay. Well, there are many ways you can use a deck. So decks help you make choices, right? So I'm going to go back to my favorite example. There are 3 decks everyone in the world should have, right? Firstly, we should have a values deck. Because if we live our life true to our values, we'll be less messed up. We'll pay less therapy bills, right? We'll be happier because, oh, I just had a great day today. Everything I did filled to my values. Of like, when your life doesn't, when you don't live to your values, you clash into people, you're triggered, you're angry, frustrated, all those things, right? Like my top 3 values are creativity, adventure, and integrity. So if I'm doing something every day that's creating, that's adventurous, and I'm feeling that I'm not leaving anything in my wake, no mess behind me, I'm living in integrity, I'm feeling incredibly purposeful, right? And if everyone knew what their values were and they shared them with everyone else around them, we could actually interface with people much more cleanly, because I can speak to your values, you can speak to mine, and we don't rub into each other in the wrong way. So that's a values deck, right? And the way you use a values deck is that there's maybe 60 different values, and you go through and go, not me, maybe, definitely me, maybe, and you make choices, and then you go back to that list until you whittle that down. It's really hard to whittle down to 3 out of 60.
So basically with the app, with Deckible, you can make these selections, so you can have different stacks of cards within one card deck.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's there for you forever, and you can go back to it, you can journal on it, you can share it with friends, you can ask them to see what their values are, right? So that's just a values deck, but there's also a strengths deck and an emotions deck, because if you know what your strengths are and you play to your strengths and surround yourself with other people that fill in your weaknesses, and then also have an emotions deck, because if you can fully express your emotions, so shove them inside, because that's just going to pay for them later, bury that down. No, I'm feeling frustrated right now. This doesn't feel good to me. I'm angry about this. I'm feeling hurt, let down. Oh, I'm so happy. Look, whatever it is you're feeling, if you express all of that, that keeps you clean, not messed up, not, therapy waiting to happen. So that, and I wish we taught these things at school.
Yes.
I wish we had a values deck and a strengths deck and an emotions deck, and then we go through life and we meet new people, and we do our values align? Do our strengths align? Can this person express their emotions in the same way that I need to? Right? Can we interface together? Right? So there's also like ideation decks, like how do you create a strategy? Because not everyone's innovative, right? But the decks can help you because they give you tools like, the little tricks that you can use to, so there are facilitation decks. So if you're not a skilled facilitator, you can hire a facilitator, or you could, maybe have a deck that takes you through the process. Not as good as a facilitator, but it's better than having
assuming
nothing.
that facilitation was just about the activities.
Right. But it gives people a framework. Decks are models and frameworks. Like you can make them. There's 1,000 different business models out there. And usually that's a quadrant or some kind of grid and a methodology of you can put every single one of those into a deck.
Yes, and it reminds me of the value of an idea is usually, or a solution is usually found in the question to ask and not in the ideas that are generated. So having decks that support the process of coming up with better questions.
Right, totally. And then actually having the answers recorded. Because this is what we said the answer was last year. Oh God, I'd forgotten that. That's why we made that decision. Oh yeah, well, it was the right decision at the time. And now look what's changed. We've got to ask a different question and answer it differently. Okay, we're clean. We didn't behave irrationally last year. It was intelligent. We've got the log. These are the questions we asked. These are what we answered. Those answers still look valid given last year. But now in 2022, we're going to ask this question. And we're going to answer that differently because this, and this happened. Okay, so now we need to shift. Okay, everyone understand? Yeah, great, cool. Everyone's with you, right? You've
Also,
and that's what decks can facilitate, right? Just that, those packaging up those questions, that knowledge, that process, that questioning, the responses, the journaling that goes with it. It's all simple.
and I think the fact that we can attach visuals,
Right.
we attach visuals to ideas, and thereby create an emotional response.
And there's something, so in my board game, you didn't actually have to, it was a game about giving gifts, and you could actually play the whole game in silence, right? No one ever did, because they were like, why didn't you want that? Well, I didn't think this. And that conversation is voluntarily spawned in the game.
Can you quickly explain what the game is about?
It's basically a game's called Gift Trap, and you give gifts to people to like, so the game comes with 640 random gifts, right? And so you deal out some gifts and say, and now you've got 6 people you're playing with, but you've got 7 gifts to choose from. But you can only give each gift, one gift to one person. So you have to prioritize. It's like a management game. You're prioritizing resources. It's like, I can't give everyone the Ferrari or the facelift or the whatever, right? Or the holiday in Switzerland, or the facilitation coach for the session, right? All right, who am I going to give that to? And you have to prioritize. And then everyone, before they realize what gifts you've given them, ranks the gifts. So they're not biased by your, the fact you gave it me, you're going to tell me, oh, that's great, thank you. No, they get to see the gifts and they say, this is what I think is great, this is good, this is bad, this is awful. And then they open the gifts and you score them based on how they rank, right? So we actually give each other feedback about how we give gifts, and no one plays it in silence, but you don't have to speak. And that's the magic of that. That facilitates a magical experience, right? And the reason I mentioned that was with Deckible. I realized by accident I've created a similar experience. So when you pull some cards and choose, I'm choosing my values, you can literally pinch and zoom the cards. And you literally are moving the cards around the playing surface, like on your desktop or your tablet or your phone, and you pinch and zoom. When you're pinching and zooming, I absolutely guarantee you, you're nowhere else. You're not thinking about your shopping list, your tax filing that you haven't done yet, the argument that you had this morning, the presentation you got tomorrow. You're right there. And that moment of when we often tell people to meditate, it's like return to the breath, return to the breath. There's this conscious instruction. When you get distracted, come back here. When you're doing this with the cards and making choices, you're just there. We don't have to tell you to be there. And it's a happy accident, but being there creates mindfulness and a meaningful experience. And it was fun, it wasn't painful, and it was tactile, and it was touchy-feely and emotional, and all of those things in one. So that's a pretty cool experience in my mind. And I only just recently realized that I've drawn that parallel to like what happened with my game. This was the magical thing that came from it. And you could never design those things, I don't think, in a conscious sense. They come out. You create the experience. You facilitate the experience. Often that's getting out of the way. Often that experience is facilitated by doing less, taking rules out of the process, right? So people just turn up and this magical experience is created, right? And then people leave thinking, oh, that was really fun. We actually got stuff done. It's good, right? And if you can create magical experiences, that's when people change, grow, shift, learn, evolve, Yeah,
and if these magic experience emerge from a situation, I think you can sometimes overemphasize or overinvite and thereby create awkward moments. And I think the magic of these cards is that it's easy to speak about yourself and your feelings, your emotions, your experience while describing a card.
Right.
and describing what you see in it. For instance, I love Dixit, the game, and
Right.
what we
Yeah,
see in
exactly.
these Dixit cards.
No,
You
totally.
can learn so much about a person and how they see the
How
world
they exactly, exactly.
on what they
You know,
focus on this card. And I think this gift giving game, the moment that you don't require or ask someone to speak it out or to over explain, creates this vacuum of curiosity.
right.
Where there is the intrinsic urge to communicate and to share.
Right.
Also because
I
gift
did.
is you put a positive connotation around it. It's a
Right.
gift.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
And I didn't understand that. I went through the process of creating it and saw the magic in the game, but to put the words around what I'm describing now, that took me a while to realize. And like you just described it with Dixit, it's the same, right? But I'll give you an example of a game that's not that way. And I used to love it, Cranium.
Don't know that.
Cranium. Cranium is a big 4-in-1 game where you can draw and spell and act and
Like Taboo.
Yeah, but it's very much like point a gun at your head and say, do this right now.
Mm.
And a wonderful game for extroverts, but you don't get, there's a lot of people who don't want to play it because they're feeling like they're being forced to do something. You force an extrovert to do something, totally cool, don't care, they just do whatever, right? But other people, and you don't actually get the real response. You get the projected egoic projection, right?
Don't get to the heart.
Right. Whereas when you the honest, the content in the game is just the stage that lets this experience emerge.
The excuse.
Yeah. And the same with the cards, right? Is people in the workplace are like, you know, they're uncomfortable. We're not comfortable with being human beings in the workplace because it's like this place I go to work is it, and really we should all be expressive and emotive and feel comfortable to do that, but a lot of company cultures don't support that, right? And yet they need that to be that way, and mindfulness has become a big thing that's driving that, and this recognition of living out of conflict from how you need to be, or trying to be two people, trying to be the me that goes to work and the me that comes at home. That's a therapy bill waiting to happen, right? Whereas if we can facilitate heartfelt communication in a workplace, why not? And I think you can. And that happens in a facilitation process, whatever it is you're actually working on, we can humanize that. It doesn't have to be hostile. It can be gentle, caring, respectful.
Yes. And I wonder to what extent one problem is that you're always looking for either consistency, coherence, or one answer. So when I was thinking of the game you described, or the Taboo style, where you have to do something in a certain way, most probably for the others to guess, to come up with the right answer.
Right.
And this basically restricts our creativity. Whereas in games like Dixit, you open the possibility to just sneaking a glance into someone else's perspective or world, and there is no right or wrong. So the process is actually the goal. And it reminded me, your story of this, the magic you created with this gift-giving game, reminded me of a workshop experience that I recently created. And I was told afterwards that it was magic. And I didn't even think of that. And I called it the dialogue of the deaf.
Right.
What would happen if we speak about a topic that is very uncomfortable and very vulnerable and personal while being on mute? Right. So we chose the topic of sexuality, a topic that you definitely in a professional context don't want to talk about while you're unmuted.
Right.
And then creating the situation where you're witnessed speaking about this topic, but nobody can hear the words you're speaking. And I wasn't aware of how much intimacy and curiosity and trust we created by just sharing this moment of witnessing. And it wasn't about the content. And I wonder, so why am I telling this story? I wonder whether the images on the Dixit cards, the gifts that we wrapped and unwrapped, whether it's really about the images, whether it's really about the gifts, or whether it's actually about the emotional, about witnessing each other's emotional
It is
exploration.
the game, the images create the safe space, the scenery, the backdrop that doesn't make that person feel it's about them. They just express because they want to, they can, it feels good. They want to, you know, when it's direct, say something funny, tell me a joke. It's like, you know, you recoil, right? Because I feel like that feels challenging, right? But just if the environment is there and it happens, it feels wonderful. And I think that's what I wish I could. I mean, there's something truly magical about what I discovered with Gift Trap. And I think I feel the same way about Deckible. And it's like, when are you creating experiences that actually create other people to step in and participate, as opposed to withdrawing? Like, because when you have two people and, you know, two people sitting on either side of a kind of valley, if there's conflict, people go up and away from each other. But if there's positivity, they step in closer, they're more curious, right? They lean in. And you're always trying to create environments, I think, where people step closer and you narrow the distance, the gaps between them emotionally, physically. And they see, like your comment with Dixit was, you see somebody through a different, you see the way, I hadn't appreciated the way you think. I would never have guessed you would pick that card, but there was a consistency with which you picked all the cards you picked when we played last night. I see a pattern that I hadn't understood about you. Now, you probably never have that conversation with someone because that's like several levels beyond, but you can actually notice, oh my God, Fred thinks really this way. That's really interesting. I didn't get that about him, right? And then it changes maybe you then have that conversation with that person. I never really thought of it, but that's not the goal. The first goal is just to notice. And the game facilitates that, puts that person in a position where he can be seen. We all want to be seen.
And I wonder, I have this light bulb moment where I wonder what would become possible in organizations where there's always, so theoretically, organizations know that they have to curate different perspectives in order to achieve innovation.
Right.
Ray Dalio is one of those who always says he wants to attract people who are highly intelligent but disagree with him because he wants to see the world through their eyes. But usually when we are trying to find people who would disagree with us, it is already emotionally charged because they do disagree. So it requires so much emotional maturity to actually accept that. But what if we could use these kind of cards like Dixit to learn about different persons' perspectives? Oh, I didn't see that you're seeing the world. This is the consistency that you see in the cards. This says something very specific about the way you see the world.
Exactly. And that's hard to express because even that person probably doesn't even have the words to say, I see the world this way.
Because that's the only perspective they have, right? They don't know it's different. Doesn't everyone see it?
Yeah, exactly. When I was saying, like, I see everything as connected, I realized now, because for 20 years of my life or 40 years of my life, I didn't realize that other people didn't see that way. Right? That's a lot of personal reflection time, struggling with the challenge of trying to be creative and realizes it occurs. But what if I just curated the ideas instead of creating? Which one moves you forward faster? Most of us don't actually care. I think if we achieve if we get to a sense of achievement, we made something, we changed something, that makes us feel good. I think more people if we get to that point where we've created an experience that transformed everyone, the company performs better, everyone's happier, no one's leaving, We all respect each other. We bond as a team. Suddenly the company performs better. Why was that? Because human beings were turning up instead of these projected, personas. This is how I thought I was wanted to be seen in the workplace. No, I'm actually understood now. People see me for what skills they bring. Don't get me to do that. Get Fred to do that. That's his strength, right? Let me do things that I value. Those things all, it shocked me when I discovered that my 3-deck theory, like everyone should have values, emotions, and feelings. I honestly tell you, I did not have feelings. I was working with a coach, and she basically, obviously she'd sensed this, right? And this was the coach that I was working with on the project right at the beginning, right? And it's like, she said, which of these, where do you experience these through, and basically some of them were thoughts and some of them were feelings. And to me, they're all the same, because I was processing everything through my head, right? And so it was a shock to me to realize that there was actually a difference between thoughts and feelings. And a long story, but my feelings came back at one point, and was like the champagne cork popping out of the bottle. It was explosive. It was like they'd gone away and they came back. And I was like, oh my God, these are feelings. That's why these tears, that's why I'm hyperventilating, why I'm crying. This stuff's been buried, right? So when you've gone through that, as a creator, I feel like that's such a gift to have my feelings back. Because I didn't even know I lost them. It's like this story of when did the boy lose his feelings? I have no idea. Was it when I was 7, 5, 20? So I have no idea. Honestly, it doesn't matter. I've got them back, and I practice them, make sure they're all still. Like I tune making sure your car can still start. It's like, I've not lost them again. It's good to have that. Because you have more scope to receive information when you have that. You have like a broader spectrum.
And to share information.
Right.
For me, an entire new world opened when I started reading Brené Brown's The Atlas of the Heart.
Oh yeah, I've got it somewhere around, not far away. You know what that is? That should be a card deck.
Yes, 100%. And I'm sure she's working, or her team is working on that.
Run it around the universe. Yes. She's going to find out she's going to watch this video, get to this exact moment and go, oh my God, yeah, I should have made a deck, not a book. I mean, it's a beautiful book. It's more like a coffee table book.
It is. It is.
But if it had been a deck, it'd be way more useful, right?
Absolutely. Because I think it's the way how I learned through this book to communicate. And I hear you. So when my coach asked me, so where do you feel it? I was like, what do you mean? Well, it's in my head. I'm like, no, where do you feel it in your body? I'm like, I don't know, where am I supposed to feel it? And she's like, are you feeling it in your chest, in your belly? Yeah, chest sounds about right. So it took me. Yeah. So I was kind of searching for what kind of answer do you want to hear?
I think we're both secret members of Lost Feelings Anonymous. Yes. There's probably a lot of people like this. It's like, it's very strange, but fun.
And also because I think we lost the language to speak about it. And the moment where we speak about it, and then it was through reading the book that I then realized, oh, this feels like sadness, but different. Oh, that's grief. Right. And then I still struggle a little bit where I feel it in my body. But I think it's a process.
There's one book. Where's that going? Oh, this one. Oh, and this one. Sorry, we're getting into a book distraction here. This book is really cool.
Emotional equations. Oh, yes, I came across someone citing this book recently.
So when it comes to we talk about feelings, right? Then basically this says this feeling is this plus that. This says calling is pleasure divided by pain. Each regret equals disappointment plus responsibility. Like this.
Such a nerdy book.
I know, but it's like, these are the tools that nerdy people need to go, like, we never taught how to feel.
Yes.
We never taught to put words. So Brené Brown's trying to teach this with that book, but she's not going back to square one and saying, for grade whatever, here's the basics of 101, how to put feelings into place and how to legitimize feelings in the workplace. Because we're put on this metaphoric suit that shields us in the workplace from expressing our feelings and projecting this, strong, successful, veneer rather.
And especially putting it into literally logical equations facilitates again the communication about it and to make sense out of it.
Because you don't have to agree with the equation. The equation doesn't have to be right. It's a straw man. Remember, it's like this, but it's slightly different for you, but it gives us the tools to actually communicate and understand where we're coming from, right? So it was funny. I know what I found you this book. You said about this is one of my favorite books. Have you ever read this?
The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. No, I'll write it down.
It's really cool. And basically, one of their ideas is the idea of like, ideas are sexy. Like there is sexuality and intimacy that comes from creation. And it's actually true, right? Like honestly, I always feel as a guy, like women can create life, right? But guys create things because we can't create babies.
Maybe also create may we women also create things and ideas.
Yeah, you can. I mean, that's the funny part, is you've always been able to, but you get, I don't know, we shouldn't go into this conversation, you get so distracted, but it's like creation is the only way that a guy can create things, right? But women can do, but they also have another way of creating that's sort of more,
And I totally agree. There's this, you don't create a new idea is seldomly born just from you yourself.
Right.
But it's new other ideas. It is fertilizing. And then you're pregnant with an idea. So Deckible, it took you 3 years to grow it, to nurture it, to and then giving birth. I remember that after the first time I hosted my Never Done Before festival, my therapist diagnosed something close to postnatal depression.
Totally.
I just fell into this hole of, okay, so now I gave birth to this idea. It worked, it's healthy, everyone loves it, but what the heck am I doing now with my life?
And nobody was coming and telling you how wonderful you were because the event was over. So you basically fell off an emotional validation cliff.
And I think with a product or an idea, especially if it's co-created.
Every idea is co-created.
Yeah.
You may egotistically stamp your name all over it, but the best ideas, the more you let other people participate, the better the idea will be. And it's that way anyway. Everything is a co-creation, a cross-fertilization. No ideas are original these days.
And that's why podcast, books, all these kind of media are so important, because you just pick and choose ideas and then suddenly they make sense in a totally different context.
Totally. Fascinating. I mean, it's interesting, where do you get your idea sources from? Because, for example, some people are very podcast centric, right? And some people are blog post centric. I personally choose to read fully finished books, right? Because they're more like fully baked and they've been edited and they're still down, so I can get the book, consume it. My consumption medium of choice is Audible because I listen to it. But I have other friends that get Blinkist, So then Blinkist is like the book and chunk it into 15 minutes. It doesn't actually use any words in the book because it's actually a review site and they can't quote the book. But you get the idea, right? You've lost the soul of the author in there, but.
And then the question, what makes a good book? Is it really the core idea that can be summarized, or is it the facilitation and the story around the idea that then actually triggers your own thoughts? Because I tried Blinkist for a moment, and then I realized that it's not about the core idea, because most of the core ideas are not new.
Exactly. No, I don't. I'm not a huge Blinkist fan. I prefer going on a journey with the author. You know, if the author reads the book, I can listen to Brené Brown telling me about the stories, and I can listen to Simon Sinek saying this, and you know, I can listen to Jim Detmer tell me about this, or you know, it's pretty cool. And that way you get, and then you start, you know, I often take two books and have a baby, right? The idea is you cross-fertilize. You just stand on the shoulders of giants. You don't need to have your own original ideas. Just take other people's ideas and jam them together, right?
And this doesn't usually happen from just taking the bottom line idea, but it happens when your brain suddenly goes on a tangent because you hear a certain word or you read a certain phrase in a new context, and then suddenly it snaps on a synapse on another brain cell.
Right. And if you don't, and there are ways to be more skilled in picking up those synapses, that connection, right? You can hone those skills. Like, I think, I mean, that's hard for me to say because someone who's like hyper connected, I think you can hone those skills. Because they're just looking for them and spotting those connections and going, oh, that's an idea. You don't need to be original. You just take two other people's things and that's now original.
And I think you can train that. I think it's a muscle. Of course, some are skilled naturally more than others, but I think brainstorm, I used to brainstorm almost daily on questions. Okay, this is a topic. How many questions can I come up in 3 minutes? And just writing it down. And that's an exercise I love to do with groups, because I think we're not training it enough.
The idea of pushing it to 100 ideas, right?
Yes.
Is when because we can all do 5 ideas on something, but those 5 ideas are all like obvious and the top of head. It's when you actually push your way through and come up with some really crappy ideas. Just the other side of a crappy idea is a good one. You just got to work your way through it, right?
And then, I love to then plot them on a kind of on quadrants to ask which ones are irrelevant. Which ones are the irrelevant ideas, and which ones are more relevant, and which are easy to implement, difficult to implement, and then zooming into those that are considered irrelevant, because usually they are hiding blind spots or overconfidence.
Right.
And that's where the actual gold is hidden. Take the irrelevant ones and find the relevance in them. Why do you dismiss them too quickly?
Yeah,
and that's where the brain actually starts to develop interesting ideas, I think.
Totally. No, it's very we are just cross-fertilizing things, and it's about, if you don't realize that, you're not prioritizing your time enough because you're letting your mind wander on all these different things, right? If you were more careful about what you chose to focus on. Like I wrote 9/10 of a book 3 years ago, and I just didn't follow it through because I just thought, well, you know what? This is a fun thing. It's like, what's the expression? You should marry trends and date fads, right? And it's like, be careful which ideas you because some ideas, if it's a real idea, you should marry it, and because it's a long commitment to take an idea from start to finish. But if it's just a little cool idea, it's a mild flirtation, it's a date. It doesn't mean it's not a long-term relationship, right? And so I concluded with my book, I was like, this is dating. I don't want to marry this. I don't want to be doing this for 3 years, right? So when you pick up an idea and you're going to run with it, say, before you pick it up and it gets emotionally in you, because once you're in it, you can't see it. But if you actually say, am I willing to date this book for 5 years, this project, or marry this book? And if you're not, then stop.
There must be a card deck for that. I
Yeah,
love it.
If not,
I love the process of defining. I mean, I love the analogy of dating in general, also for job and for working
Right.
for companies. Yes, treat it like a date. I think it's so important. Do you want to marry? Do you want to marry this organization, or is it just a one-night stand? Is it just a date? And sometimes it's okay.
Yeah, an interview is enough.
Yeah, sometimes it's enough, and sometimes just being there for a year or two is also enough. But then be clear about what you want from the beginning,
Exactly.
and be transparent, and take the choices.
It is a beautiful metaphor, right? It's totally cool.
Yeah, I love it with ideas. Do I want to marry this idea? What makes a workshop?
You're like, I can see you're like the dating facilitation workshop coming up, I think, somewhere soon.
I did one, but the metaphor was about the client. Is the client a one-night stand, a fling, an arranged marriage? Very interesting.
Or just the divorce settlement.
Yes, yes. Or a friend with benefits, sometimes good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and depending on what kind of how you approach this client, something different comes out. Because sometimes one night stand, it's a one-off workshop that's good enough. But how can you turn it into something longer term?
Oh dear. We could go down a whole rabbit hole there, I think, right? Several hours later.
What makes a workshop fail?
Non-participation or faux participation. People not really being there.
Mentally, physically, emotionally?
Yeah, all of the above, right? If people don't want to participate, they're not going to. So if you don't facilitate, you've got to set up the scenario where, people's willingness happens, right? I think they need to feel that I mean, if you're already fighting a loser battle, if people turn up not wanting to be there, you've probably lost by then. I mean, maybe it's rescuable, but if people want to turn up because they believe that this is actually going to, if it's like, oh yeah, it's another one of those all-day workshops we're going to go to, right? Yeah, sure. And we've done these for the last 3 years, but nothing's come from them. All right, well, it's another day. Yeah, okay. Like when people turn up thinking that it can change things and it will be better as a consequence, there's a wholly different experience from everybody that's there than when you're trying to create that experience where people want to be there.
And do you think that a participant who knows why they have been chosen to participate, why they've been invited, and they've been heartfully invited, do you think there's any chance that this person doesn't want to be there?
Well, thinking back from my days inside big corporate, there were certain people who were just like professional meeting attenders. And they'd always manage to spin out a few more work groups, a few more events, need another group, need another committee. Okay, perfect reason to do nothing. Like less people is usually more, up to the point of needing everyone to participate and embrace it, right? But yeah, I don't know.
And that's what I thought, that if we're only inviting those we really want to have in there because we value their perspective. We believe that they can bring value to the session. Then I guess there's an instinctive, if we feel that we're invited.
Right. Yeah, that's challenging. I think you can invite too many people, but if you've got the right momentum, then people want to be involved in successful things. So the challenge is to start small so that it looks like it's actually going to go somewhere. Then people want to attach to that because, oh, this project's going somewhere, right? I think we've all been to those meetings. We're like, why are we here?
Yeah.
Right. Where is this going?
And I think the courage is missing to be selective with the invitation, because as you say, if we're inviting a small group, it has something secretive. Maybe it's the fear of missing out. If something is happening, then
right. And
then you create
a bit
the
of
curiosity. But it requires the initial courage of someone to say, "You're in and you're not."
Right.
And someone recently said,
FOMO is a good thing. Right? FOMO is a good thing.
Yeah, the fear of missing out. Yes.
Yeah. Like if you create, yeah, I mean, that's, oh my God, we could talk for an hour on that alone. Just the whole idea of, well, this, have you heard of 1990? Okay, that's a whole different, we should do we could do a whole talk on that alone. 1990 is basically 1% of people create, 9% of people contribute, 90% of people just
consume.
Yeah, they're passive lurking, right? Because you can't always create, otherwise you don't do anything. But the idea of if you understand 1990, you can actually use it to your advantage because you're creating, you know, you only need, who needs to be at the meeting? The 1 and the 9, the 90 can consume afterwards or dial in remotely, or they're not, you know, it's like who sits in the front of the car, front of the bus, who's the driver, who's setting the direction, to who's a passive participant to consuming what's going on. But you're creating this living thing, and people's input and validation and thoughts and energy around that are real. But most of all, you need to create the desire for people to want to be there, and the best way to do that is to not have them there, and then they want to be there.
Yeah,
I once heard something special. Make something special, and then people will want to be there. And the way to make them special, make it special, is by not having them be there, and then they'll get curious.
And you need then a story to come out, or an analogy to come out that they can actually tell to the others. And
they're gonna, like, this is going somewhere, right? Because then people want to join in because they want to be associated with that. Yeah. But it's like, this isn't one of those committees that's going to go nowhere, because the people want to get off those. But if you have too many people, your committee will turn into one of those.
And I think, and that's indeed an entire different conversation and episode, is on the one, somewhere I heard that what is worse than being invited to a meeting, or being in a meeting, is not being invited to a meeting. So although nobody wants to be in the meeting, nobody wants not to be invited. And as you said earlier, it is such a great excuse to, oh, I'm so busy and I'm so in so many meetings, and it's the perfect way to avoid the real work and the decision making and the thinking. It's
like saying you could BCC people or CC people less.
Yes,
you would get more done, and you don't need to come to all these meetings. You can come to the meeting when we've actually got to a point where we have something to show, to move forward, a decision point. We can bring everyone back at that point. You know, that it's this faux involved. I mean, who reads stuff they're on CC to? You know, you could have nothing going on to like, let me read my people filter out stuff. People put in filter rules in their email to survive. And so why send stuff to people?
I think BCC is a perfect indicator for the toxicity of an organization. The more people in CC and BCC, the higher the toxicity.
Yeah, people are covering their backs.
Yeah.
And they're creating FOMO, right?
Yeah.
Why wasn't I in there on it, doing it?
Final question before we get to the end. And I'm just, as you can see, I'm squeezing my standard questions. I just squeezed them in the last 5 minutes. What is your number one facilitation challenge?
Oh my God. It's trying to, I think of it as a living community, right? And I'm trying to like bring people, but if you bring people to the boil too soon, everyone's only got so much energy. So you want to involve people so they were joyously happy to be involved and that they want to come back next time, right? Because that way you're creating, someone passes a conversation. What did you do yesterday? I went to this meeting. Was it? Oh, it's great. Yeah. Okay. Well, because you're actually we rank and rate everything. And so we describe to other people how we rank and rate everything. So if your meeting was not raved about by the people who were there, you've basically lowered the kudos and status of that meeting. So you should be more cherishing of that instead of just like, oh, it's numbers, just turn up, do the work, right? Because work doesn't really often get done in these things. So I want to kind of cultivate, it's like open rates. If your open rates of emails go down, it's because you're communicating too much. You're not telling them something amazing and interesting to want them to make open it. We'll make the meetings the same way. Like just respect people's time. So from a facilitation point of view, I'm always trying to think about how to build community. And I'm thinking, what's too much? What's too little? What should I tell them this week? How can we make it interesting and make it worthwhile? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, leaving something to look forward to. It's almost like it's like a holiday experience. You want to finish on a high to leave with the good memories.
Right.
And not at the point where you're actually already getting bored and looking forward to going back to work.
Right.
Or like the breakout room. When I came back from holidays, people asked me, how was your holidays? And I'm like, I felt like in a breakout room. There's never enough time until the moment where there's just too much time.
Yeah, just be more respectful, like of everyone.
Yeah.
If when people feel respected, they actually bring more of themselves to the time when because they know they're needed. Too much time we involve too many people, we CC and BCC too many people. And just bring the right people and create the culture where that's okay. It's okay not to be invited, because when we do invite you, there'll be some cool shit to do. Don't worry. We need your input. We want you, but it's not. We don't want to create negativity around this experience. We want to create a positive experience. So.
Thank you.
For sure.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We definitely did. I didn't think we'd be talking. I didn't think we'd be talking about what was the card game you mentioned?
Dixit?
Dixit, yeah. I didn't expect to be talking about Dixit today, so that's cool.
What is the one thing you would like the audience, if they made it until this point in time, what would you like them to walk away with?
If they're creative, if they're in this, have they got a deck inside them, or do they know a deck creator? Because everyone knows one. They're either, often people have got a game or a book inside them. I think probably they have a deck too. And if not, they have a friend who does. So pass it along. Yeah.
I put your contacts in the show notes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
To whoever who wants to continue the conversation, check out Deckible, submit
very,
the deck, or celebrate the launch.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very accessible. I'm on there on the LinkedIns and the Twitters and the Instagrams and the Deckible.coms, all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
We'll put it all in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Dum, da, da, dum. That's the end of my podcast.